Mr. Chairman, I just want to, first of all, go back for one moment, and the document that you read from June 20th, 2012, the one that you and I just got from James Cole, Deputy Attorney General, I just want to, since we were talking about executive privilege, and I do believe that we need to study this and make sure that we understand exactly what the President is asserting here, but just want to quote from it, and on the last page, page 4. It says, the legal basis for the President's assertion of executive privilege is set forth in the enclosed letter to the President from Attorney General. In brief, the compelled production to Congress of these internal executive branch documents generated in the course of the deliberative process concerning the Department's response to congressional oversight and related media inquiries would have significant damaging consequences. As I explained at our meeting yesterday, and this is still quoting from the letter, it would inhibit the candor of such executive branch deliberations in the future and significantly impair the executive branch's ability to respond independently and effectively to congressional oversight. Such compelled disclosure would be inconsistent with the separation of powers established in the Constitution and would potentially create an imbalance in the relationship between these two co-equal branches of government. And now to my statement. First and foremost, I believe that Congress does, in fact, and we will agree on this, Mr. Chairman, have a responsibility to conduct vigorous oversight of the executive branch. That is our job. The Constitution requires this from Congress, and the American people expect it from members who serve on this committee, and I take that very seriously. But the Constitution also requires something else. It requires us to recognize the legitimate interests of the executive branch and to avoid unnecessary conflict by seeking reasonable accommodations when possible. In my opinion, the committee has failed in this fundamental responsibility. Last night, the Attorney General came to us in good faith. He offered to provide additional internal deliberative documents. He pledged to provide a substantive briefing on the Department's actions. He agreed to a request by Senator Grassley to describe the categories of documents being produced and those being withheld. He made clear that he was willing to provide substantive responses to additional questions. And he even offered to provide documents that are outside the scope of the committee's subpoena. And he also made it clear that he had already provided documents that weren't even asked for. All he requested in return was that you, as chairman of this committee, give him your good faith commitment that we would move toward resolving this contempt fight. Didn't ask for ending the investigation, just ending this contempt fight. And I double-checked with my staff because when you said that, I heard, I was in the meeting with him, and I heard what he said. He was very clear. It was a fair and reasonable offer, especially in the light of the partisan and highly inflammatory personal attacks you made against him throughout this investigation. For the past year, you've been holding the Attorney General to an impossible standard. You accuse him of a cover-up, and I quote, that's a quote, protecting documents he was prohibited by law from producing. Let me say that again. You accuse him of a cover-up for protecting documents that he was prohibited by law from producing. You claim that he, and I quote, obstructed, end of quote, the committee's work by complying with Federal statutes passed by both houses of Congress and signed by the President of the United States. And earlier this month, you went on national television and called the Attorney General the nation's highest-ranking chief law enforcement officer a liar. At the same time, you refused requests to hold a public hearing with Ken Melson, the former head of ATF, the agency responsible for conducting these operations. This refusal came after Mr. Melson told the committee investigators privately that he never informed senior officials at the Justice Department about gun walking during Operation Fast and Furious because he was unaware himself. Last night, you flatly rejected the Attorney General's offer. You refused to even commit to working towards a mutually agreeable resolution. Instead, you rushed to a prearranged press conference to announce the failure of the meeting. It seems clear that you had no interest in resolving this issue and that the committee planned to go forward with contempt before we walked into the meeting with the Attorney General. It pains me to say this, but this is what I believe. This is especially disappointing since the Department has already turned over more than 1,000 pages of documents that answer your question. You want to know why the Department sent a letter to Senator Grassley initially denying allegations of gun walking. The documents show that when they were drafting this letter, the Department's Legislative Affairs Office relied on the categorical and emphatic denials from the leaders of ATF. These are the same ATF officials you now refuse to call for a public hearing. This morning, we were informed that the administration is now asserting executive privilege over, and you're right, a narrow subset, and it is indeed narrow, of documents that remain at issue. As I understand it, the assertion does not cover everything in this category, such as whistleblower documents. And the administration has indicated that it remains, and I emphasize remains, willing to try to come to a mutual resolution despite its formal legal assertion. As a member of Congress, I treat assertions of executive privilege very seriously, and I believe they should be used only sparingly. In this case, it seems clear that the administration was forced into a position by the committee's unreasonable insistence on pressing forward with contempt, despite the Attorney General's good faith offer. Mr. Chairman, it did not have to be this way. It really didn't. We could have postponed today's vote, accepted the Attorney General's offer, and worked with the Department to obtain additional documents and information. Instead, by not honoring the Constitution's charge to seek accommodation when possible, the position and prestige of this committee has been diminished, and the result should concern us all. With that, I yield back.